Good evening and welcome to What the Puck. I'm Puck. With me tonight is Lexi, also known as Exmo Lex. Lexi, how are you doing tonight? Lexi, you with us? Am I muted?
No, you're not muted.
Uh-oh, Lexi, are you there?
Can you hear us?
Is she muted?
No! No, she's not muted.
She's moving, so... Okay. Lexi, can you hear us? Oh, no. Yay, technical difficulties. This is why we love doing this live. Okay.
That's the downfall when you're doing things live. She's going to sign back in. Exmo Lex will be right back. Wow. So anyways, what are we covering here today, Puck?
Okay, so the thing that I have to remember about religion is when I left religion, it was actually really easy for me. It's not like a lot of my friends or a lot of my community was the same religion, and I relied on my contacts within the religion to do things in my everyday life. I have to remember that some other people don't have it this way, and some other people have religions that are much more pervasive and that affect more of their lives, that their social contacts, their community revolves around the religion. And I have to be more mindful of that. And that's why I invited Lexi to come on and talk about her journey out of her religion. Welcome back, Lexi.
Oh, no, not again.
Still couldn't hear.
We're having the worst luck.
Uh-oh.
This is the hardest thing about doing this live is sometimes these things happen and it really, really stinks.
Hello,
we
John
tested everything in pre-production. We tested everything a few days ago, and
we did everything but actually go live, and it worked.
Yeah, exactly. So she'll be joining in a moment, and hopefully that'll be 3 times a charm, where she is going to talk about her experience. She was a former Mormon. Puck, this is your show. You should be the one talking and rambling. Otherwise, I'm going to keep talking to fill the awkward silence.
I know, it's kind of cool. But as I was saying, that a lot of people with their religious experience was a lot more pervasive. They had a lot more community involvement with it. It's not just something you do on Sundays and something you believe. It touches a lot more aspects of your life. It can affect what you wear. It can affect what you eat.
All right, let's check this again. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Yes, can you hear me?
Jackpot.
Yeah, the video is a little bit delayed, but yes, we're good.
Okay, hopefully it stays on.
There, all right. Okay, that's good. Let's
do this. Fingers crossed.
Okay, so Lexi, I don't know if you heard that, but I was saying how my leaving religion was kind of mild because I didn't really have a lot of community. I didn't have a lot of involvement in it. I didn't have a lot of friends who were in the church at the time, but not a lot of people are so lucky. So one of the things I wanted to do on the show is talk to someone who lived in a much more pervasive religion, something that affected so much more of their lives. And I wanted to talk specifically about someone who was formerly Mormon and who is now no longer part of the church. So Lexi, what the puck is an Exmo?
An Exmo is just an ex-Mormon, so somebody who used to be Mormon and is not anymore.
Okay. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? I mean, because like when I left the church, it was basically, okay, I guess I don't do this thing on Sundays anymore. But when you leave the Mormon church, it's so much more, right?
For some people, like I've met people that used to be Mormon but don't like to call themselves an ex-Mormon. I think that a lot of it has to do with like, I don't know, like how much you want to separate yourself from that religion. So some people just say like I used to be Mormon rather than saying I'm an ex-Mormon because ex-Mormon seems kind of scary. But like for me, it's a big part of who I am to be like I'm ex-Mormon. I'm separate from that. It used to be who I was and it's not anymore. That's just how it is for me though.
No, let's talk about what you used to be then. Like how pervasive was it in your everyday life? The Mormon church service is already slightly longer than most other services, but there's also a lot more that that other Mormons do. So
right. It's for me, and I think for probably the majority and mostly people that live in Utah, it's like a huge, it's not even just like a part of your life, it's your whole identity as being a Mormon and being part of the church, because it's just not like, oh, I go to church on Sundays. It's like, this is my whole being and who I was before I was born and who I will be after I die. And it's like, I mean, it's whole life encompassing. It's how you raise your kids. It's how you make choices. It's how you make friends. It's everything in your life.
Like now, I remember from my brief involvement, you know, like you said, there was the Sunday services, which is already much longer than the typical Sunday services. But then there's just family home evening, and then there's that night in the month when you host the missionaries, and so it's so deep in there, and then you know the dietary restrictions are there also. You know, you got to be mindful of that. Now, where I was growing up, it was very different because it was like a very small group of people in the LDS church, and a whole bunch of people, and you could tell who the LDS people were at the dances because they're the ones who wouldn't even drink the soda, right? Whereas I have to imagine it's a little bit easier, for lack of a better word, a little bit easier to fit in a society where there's a whole bunch of people who are only drinking the ginger ale. But then now you get on the opposite side of that, right? And now, despite what community you used to have, now you're the one with the different beliefs, and you're the one with different appearance. It's down to appearance. You can look at someone and tell, wait a second, I think they're falling away.
Yeah.
So what is that like then? Like being part of that community and then suddenly not being, or was it even sudden? Was it a gradual transition?
For me, it was pretty dang sudden. Like I went from being a fully believing, fully active member of the church to not believing at all within just a few weeks, maybe.
And what's this?
And it was like, I mean, I don't live in Utah anymore.
So did you go through your conversion while you were living in Utah?
No, I live in Idaho, and that's still like a higher Mormon population here than the average state, but it's nothing like Utah.
It's oh my goodness, so pervasive. Like I have never been to Utah except for the airport in Salt Lake City, right? And you can still tell. You can see the temple from the airport. Mm-hmm. So it's so much. And please go.
Well, my family all lives in Utah, so we still visit pretty often. And I remember going back the first time after leaving the church and being like, I mean, we stood out. I felt like we stood out. People stared at us. Like if I wore a tank top, I would have people staring at me like daggers. It was, and I don't know, like it was just a crazy different than the times I had ever been before, when I felt like I was going home and I had something in common with everybody there. And then going back after leaving, it was like I felt so alone in a sea of Mormons.
So for someone like Ethan, who's never heard the term porn shoulders before.
Yes, thank you.
Could you touch on that a little bit about how modesty culture is so involved with Mormon culture?
Yeah, so Mormons are very modest. You're not allowed to show skin above the knee. You're not allowed to show shoulders, cleavage, upper back, midriff. Basically like wearing a t-shirt and long shorts all the time. That's what the Mormon garments or their underwear look like. And so like this would be considered very immodest and not okay within the church. Bikinis aren't okay. Guys going shirtless is not okay. They even encourage when you're wearing exercise clothing to still be modest. So yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah, and we're not exactly talking the most flattering garments either. I mean, no offense to anybody who still wears them, but yeah, they're the kind of thing that you would want to wear clothes to cover up. And I think that I've heard some people say, I think that's the point. It's like you wear these and you just, I got to cover this up.
Yeah, they're hideous.
Yeah. No, I never had garments myself, so I never had to. Is this like an all the time thing? Like when are you allowed to not have them on?
It's all the time. I mean, apart from when you're being intimate, you are allowed to take them off for that. But like you're supposed to sleep in them. You're supposed to wear them at all times. I think the only time that they kind of like, some people think it's okay and some don't, is when you're exercising or if there's like some reason you're going to get really dirty, then maybe it's better to not wear them. But for the most part, you're supposed to wear them all the time because it's supposed to protect you from Satan.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard a couple different explanations. Like the one that I'm most familiar with is that when you wear the garments, you are aware of the garments, and it makes you more aware of your covenants. That's probably what they tell you in Laurel's, but.
Yeah, well, but another part of it is that they are supposed to be like a protection. I remember like I hadn't heard that before, and when I was dating my husband, I kind of joked about, because he said that he hadn't worn his to a certain event, and his mom had said to him, but if you don't wear them, you won't be protected. And I was like, what is she talking about? Like, that sounds so dumb. But like, some people believe that they will actually protect you from temptation from the devil, that they will sometimes even protect you from physical things. So like in the church, you will hear Mormons literally like tell these stories about like, oh yeah, my cousin's friend's brother got like shot and it didn't go through his garments and his garments protected him, which is obviously BS, but like they believe that.
And this just reminded me of another aspect of Mormon or of the LDS church that most other churches don't do, and that's testimony.
LDS?
What's that?
LDS
church, yeah. What is it? Goodness, I've been saying this all this time. I have to clarify it. Mormons is kind of a colloquialism that even they don't like, so it's difficult to call. The official name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay, so LDS Latter-day Saints.
That's a mouthful.
Thank you.
Mormons just has more mouthfeel. It's just so much shorter and easier to say. And you'll catch them too. It's like I'm a member of the Church of I'm Mormon. So
Lexi, is it bad to say Mormon then, or is it to call someone a Mormon?
So it wasn't when I was in the church, but paying attention since then I've left. Their new prophet has told them that it's offensive to God when you use the term Mormon, and they don't want to be called that anymore. They want to be called members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which literally nobody wants to take the time to say in general conversation all the time.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ethan.
No. This is your show, my friend.
Okay. Well, this is one thing that also reminded me about how pervasive Mormon culture is. It's testimony Sundays, right? Where you're actually encouraged to go up in front of the congregation and tell these stories. And there is a certain, forgive me if I'm not representing everyone, but this is my experience. There was a certain pressure to go up there and share something, especially when it was youth events where pretty much everybody else was doing it. And boy, if that doesn't add some pressure to you. It's like all these other people have these stories, all these other people have these experiences, and they're looking at me like, hey, why isn't he going up there also? So that's just, and you released a video recently, which is the funniest thing I'd ever seen, about two people like talking as if they were still in the church. I don't know how you want to frame that or describe that, but it's like, this is the kind of conversation that happens. I heard this, and it's so much a part of, and that's just like in the house. But what was it like in a community where there's a lot of people in the same church as you?
It's the same as that. The people, it's I don't know, a very gossipy religion. Wards, which is, what a Mormon congregation is.
What was that?
Congregations, a ward.
Okay.
That's what they call it. And so that's like, I don't know, I guess like 200 people, depending. It kind of depends on the area, but they form little cliques and you make your friends and you gossip like crazy. And, you talk about certain people if they aren't going to church very often. It becomes very, I don't really know a word other than cliquish.
Okay.
And this was just like your understood reality, right? Like you grew up in this kind of situation.
Yeah. And even before I was old enough to do stuff like that, your parents stay after church and talk to their friends. And so you'd sit there and listen to mom and the neighbor sitting there talking about sister so-and-so and about how she did such and such, or she hasn't been to church. And it's the kind of thing you almost learn to do because everybody around you does it.
Okay, so they really do gossip a lot, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's that's the best way to put it when being honest about it. I mean, it's not pretty. And I look back and it's like, some of the things that are said are really not very nice, but they always say it. This is something that Mormons say all the time that's really annoying. They'll be like, she's such a sweet spirit. And what they mean by that is like, I'm trying to be nice, but I'm not being nice.
So that's so saying she's such a sweet spirit is like a backhanded compliment.
Yes. It's like when people in the South are like, oh, bless your heart.
Can't tell you how many times I've been told that. That's awesome. Okay, so you're in this and you grow up in this, and it's for lack of a better word, this is your normal, right? And then
yeah, absolutely.
And then something clicks in your head. It's like, wait a second, and I don't know this part of your story because I haven't watched that much of your material. Suddenly, what? Like what started to happen? And you were married at this time? You were married in the church, and then
yes.
You and your husband, did you deconvert together? Like run me through that whole process.
Okay, so basically there's a thing called the CES letter, which a lot of ex-Mormons know about because it's the thing that led them out of the church. But it's basically a letter that was written to a church educational system director that was asking hard questions that the church hadn't answered, or that there wasn't an answer to, things that most Mormons don't know about, like why did Joseph Smith marry a 14-year-old girl? Hard questions that people don't know the answers to. So you can find this all online, but it's basically, it goes over, it's over 100 pages, I think, of questions that a questioning Mormon had. And it's kind of cliche almost to say that what led me out of the church is what the CES letter, because it happens to a lot of people. But for me, almost like probably 99% of what is in that letter is stuff that I had never heard before as a Mormon. And it was all very damning and shocking to me. And that's kind of what started it, is looking at that, seeing things that I never knew before, and clicking and seeing there were sources for everything, and being overwhelmed by how much the church had kept from me my whole life. And my husband, he didn't know any of it either. He was gone when I read the letter, and when he came home, we both talked about it together, and we did end up leaving the church together after reading the letter together.
Now,
that's kind of the short story.
When you think of a letter, okay, you think of like, a couple of pieces of paper folded up in an envelope. No, the CES letter is dozens of pages. I mean, this is, and I guess let's fill Ethan in and anybody else who isn't familiar with this. The LDS Church is a somewhat interesting in the sense that their entire history is all recorded within U.S. history. The religion itself is only about, 170, 180 years old, right? So down to its origin.
I believe it's 190, yeah.
Yeah, so down to its origin, we know where it came from. And it also has its own source materials, unlike a lot of other religions. You have the Bible, but then you also have the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine of Covenants, and some other scriptural writing. Unlike most religions, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a continuing religion. They believe in continued revelation. They actually have someone that they consider to be a living prophet. I've lost track of what his name is. Kimball?
Russell M. Nelson.
Nelson. Okay, sorry. You can see how long it's been since I paid attention to this stuff, but I think I got one of the names right? Okay. So
yeah, there was a Kimball.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
there is a long history and an origin which a lot of religions don't have. You know where this started, and it started with a man named Joseph Smith, and this letter is going to start exposing some of the stuff that is known in church history, but they don't really talk about, and they don't let a lot of their members, they don't bring this up in Sunday school. And I am so sorry, Amber. I apologize. I was unaware. Okay, but this is what's interesting to me about the Mormon Church, because they have this letter that says, hey, these are the problems that we have with the church. Can you explain this? Can you talk about this? And this CES letter is responsible for a lot of deconversions. So it's interesting to hear that you and your husband actually went through this together, because a lot of couples don't.
So if I may question, you were two, Lexi, you two were married at the time?
Yes. We've been married for, I think, 6 years, and we had 4 kids.
So when you left the church, did you leave your belief in God, or did you just leave, your Mormon beliefs?
It started out as just the Mormon beliefs, because I was able to separate like God and Jesus Christ and Christianity from Mormonism. But it was the kind of thing where I was like, there are still questions that I have, and I don't want to not know. And so it was like, I'm going to keep looking into this. I'm not going to stop at Mormonism, because if it's true, it'll stand up for itself. But you know, within a few weeks of leaving Mormonism, I became an atheist too.
That quickly?
Yes, it was within a month. I decided that it wasn't a decision. It was more like I just lost that belief because it wasn't true in my mind anymore.
You know, that's a common thing I hear too. It's not like you chose not to believe. It just doesn't add up anymore, and you can't wrap your mind around it, and you can't bring yourself to it anymore. And then it's more like realizing within yourself and
yeah.
And
a lot of people seem to think that it's a decision, but it wasn't a decision. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Let's answer Cynthia's question right now.
I was hoping you would address this right away.
Okay, I'm going to answer this really quickly. That I was not involved in it long enough to know about this. I've heard about the history, but I wasn't really involved with it, so I'm the wrong person to ask. But as someone who was more in the community, Lexi, maybe you can address this. Were any of you privy to racism in the Mormon Church? Has that ever changed?
So I never saw any of it in my time in the church myself. They taught us a little bit about how the church used to not allow African Americans into the temple, and it didn't give them the priesthood. But then it was almost seen as like a positive thing when like they're like, oh, guess what? Like Black people can get the priesthood and go to the temple now. Yay! Like it was never like it wasn't taught to us as like, oh no, this was a sad thing in the past. It was just like, guess what? In the 70s, it changed, so everything's awesome now. That's honestly how it was for me.
Yeah, and so this was before I came along, so it's like I wouldn't have known about what the church was like back in the day. And and so when I was involved with the church, it was one of those like hush hush things. It's like, yeah, we used to do that. We have received revelation.
We're different now.
Yeah. And a new one of this is LGBT youth, right? Like there's different standards for this now. So, you know, I don't know if you want to get in. I don't know too much about it. And if you don't, then that's cool. But standards have changed for that as well.
I mean, right. It's not the same as it used to be. And obviously I wasn't born before that happened. And so I never saw any of that personally. It was just stuff I heard. And I actually didn't hear it at church. I heard it from like grandparents and people who actually were alive when that had happened. And all I remember really is them saying things like, I remember like being so happy and filled with joy when the prophet announced this, that Blacks could go in the temple and stuff. That's all my experience with it really. And keep in mind that I grew up in a very, very white environment. And so I didn't know very many people of color. It was like, I mean, I don't know. It just never occurred to me. I didn't think about it that much, and I didn't hear about it that much. And the church never, ever, ever taught it at church.
Okay, so that explains you and your husband, and your kids were far too young to really know too much about what was going on. But your family was not. Your family at some point became aware of your decision. How did that go?
Yes. I guess you could say it wasn't too terrible. At first, like, I already had some family that was like not 100% on board with the church. And we were kind of forced to tell people sooner than we wanted to. My parents took it really pretty reasonably well. My husband's parents were more upset about it, I think. Honestly, it didn't really make too much of a difference, and they were still really, cordial and stuff to us until they found out that I had a YouTube channel, and that's when things got a little bit more difficult.
So this is all crazy new to you, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about just like the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's been a year and a half since I left the church.
See, this is cool. Talking to, and I don't say new atheist to mean the movement of new atheism that's coming on. When I say new atheist, I mean people who are new to being atheist. Ethan's kind of new to this also. I'm old
hat. To being an outspoken atheist,
yeah,
or a YouTube atheist.
See, I'm old hat. I've been here for a while, but I like a lot of people, I kept it here until the time was right to bring it out. You said it kind of was brought out against your will, or you came out before you meant to.
Well, the church decided in, January 2019, I believe, to implement a new program where instead of doing 3 hours of sacrament or 3 hours of church basically every Sunday, you would do 2 hours, and then the third hour you were supposed to do at-home church. And my in-laws texted us when that announcement was made and said, we would like everybody to participate in this program together. So we'll all text about what we learned at home. And we were both like, well, we can either lie and like pretend to go along with it, or we can tell the truth. And I felt like it would be better to just tell the truth, to tell them we wouldn't be participating because we didn't believe.
Okay. How did this affect your community life outside of family?
It was hard because most of the people that we were friends with are Mormon because, we go to church, you make friends at church. And so like my babysitters were Mormon and the people I hung out with most often were Mormon. And once we were no longer members, our babysitters stopped babysitting for us.
Are you serious?
I would ask them to come over and they would make up every excuse under the sun not to be there. Until I finally just stopped asking because it didn't matter what time of day or what day it was, they would say, no, I can't. And, I stopped getting invited to things as much. People stopped speaking to me as much as they used to. And yeah, it's the kind of thing where it starts to feel very lonely because you can't really talk to people about it because when people are in the church and they hear things that are against the church, they just automatically assume that it's lies and they don't want to hear it. And they kind of just like an ostrich with their head in the sand. They're like, nope, not talking about it, not going there. So he couldn't even talk to people, it was very lonely.
See, Ethan's getting upset and I don't blame him for this. But what like, I don't mean to make this to soften the blow because it sucks. Okay. But one thing that you hear when you're in the church or when you're in very insular groups like that is you don't want even the possibility of influence from the outside world. So I can imagine, Lexi, you possibly being in a situation where a person who used to babysit for you, suddenly their parents say, I don't want you to be possibly influenced by someone who is now of the world.
Yeah.
Is this starting to sound about
exactly.
right? Okay. So it's once someone is not a part of the church, or if someone was always not a part of the church, they're seen as a permanent, irredeemable bad influence. Am I summing this up well?
Well, and see, I think it's worse when it's somebody who's actually an ex-Mormon versus somebody who never was Mormon, because somebody who never was, they see as an opportunity to convert. And they see as like, I can be a positive influence on that person. But if you're somebody who left and you purposely left, you got your records removed from the church, you no longer want any part of it, then they see you as almost like an enemy, like somebody that has information that can destroy testimonies. And they do not want their kids around a person like that.
Oh, I forgot to touch on that. Leaving the church isn't as simple as just not going to church on Sundays anymore. No, it takes a lawyer to do it.
Wait, whoa. What?
Lexi, can you confirm?
Yeah, the church now requires you to have a signed affidavit from a, what's the word? The word is escaping me.
I don't remember the legal term, but
basically like somebody that has power of attorney that can sign a document saying this person actually really wants to leave. You also have to have your ID, but it kind of depends on the way you go about it, because like a really popular way to leave the church is to go through quitmormon.com. And if you go that way, you do have to have an ID and you have to get the signed document and everything. But if you go through like a bishop, like of your ward, so they can confirm who you are, you just need to write down and say, I no longer want to be a part of this, and sign it. And then if it comes straight from the bishop, then you don't need all those other things. But they're trying to make it more difficult for people, and that's why they made it that way.
So let me ask you this. What happens if you don't do that?
They won't accept your resignation.
Yeah, they keep records of like addresses, phone numbers. They'll continue to call you. They'll continue to send you mail, information regarding changes in the church in case you want to start coming back. It's borderline harassment at that point.
Wow.
So,
well,
that is harassment.
No, even if you do resign, they still keep a record of you, because there have been people who resigned and the church is supposed to not bother you at all at that point. But there have been people that resigned and went back, and they still have a record within the church. This church still has all that information. They just don't contact you anymore.
What
can you help
about
with Katie's question here really quick? Do minors have to sign anything if they're leaving also, or I don't know how this works. This is well beyond me.
As far as like what I know, they don't. It's just their parents. But we specifically, when we left, we asked for all of our children's records to be removed too. Even though they hadn't been baptized yet, the church keeps a record as soon as you're born and blessed, which is they bless babies when they're born into the church. We specifically asked the church to get rid of our children's records because we don't want them associated with the church at all until they're old enough to want to do that themselves. But they never sent a confirmation saying that they had done that. So I actually don't know if they still have my children's information or not.
I wouldn't like. I know that lawyers get involved. I don't know to what extent. This is something I'm glad I got a chance to ask someone about, because this is stuff I've heard secondhand. I am no longer in the same state that I was in, so I don't think anybody knows how to contact me except for a couple people who I'm friends with who know that I'm atheist. So they're cool with that because a couple of them are atheists too. So with like I there's so many places to go here. I'm having trouble picking just one.
So let me do this.
Yeah, please.
Lexi, I just want to point out one thing. You do have some people in the comments that are saying, thank you for your bravery. Glad to see your channel growing. We're here for you. So you do have the support of the audience. And I myself am very thankful and proud of you for doing this. It takes courage to do. So sorry, I had to jump in.
No, that's fine. But like, okay, going back to your story, like I have nowhere else to go, but just go back to your story. You lost a lot. You lost your contacts, you lost your socials, you lost your friends, you lost your support network. How do you begin to build back up from
that? The first thing I did was go online and find people I knew that had left the church and ask them for their opinions on what I should even do. There's people I knew personally that I was friends with as a child that I knew had left, and I went and asked them okay, this just happened, help, why did nobody tell me about this stuff before? And then from there I went to Reddit looking for ex-Mormons, and then from there to Facebook looking for ex-Mormons, and then branching out, finding atheist communities to join. And there, even on Facebook, there's local ex-Mormon places and groups and things. So I found those people, and I was it kind of took a while of getting to that point. But then I was can we have game nights? Can you guys come over so we can talk about this? I need people who get where I'm coming from. And that's kind of where it started, was just reaching out through the internet and making friends that way.
I will say I'm a major fan of that. Since doing this, I have met so many people from all over the world, and it is really, and that's Puck. To give you an example, Puck saw my first debate, and he reached out to me basically to tell me how bad it was and if I wanted some tips. And I was like, I like this guy. It takes balls to say to someone you don't know, you didn't do a good job. Do you need some help? But honestly, I'm grateful I met him. So yeah, it's reaching out on the internet. It works. You can really meet other people. You can connect with them, and it's great.
Okay. Now, unlike most What the Puck episodes, we're getting a flood of wonderful questions for you, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for those. But going back to where you coming out of it to where you are now, what made you decide to be an outspoken YouTube advocate for atheism and being an ex-Mormon? What made you go from I no longer believe to I gotta speak out about this?
Yes, good question.
So I guess I kind of have my dad to thank for that, because he we're friends on Facebook, and I commented on a Zelf on the Shelf video on Facebook, which is another ex-Mormon YouTube channel. And all I said was I totally understand. Basically, I get where you're coming from with a heart. yay, like I get it, I've been there. And he replied to my comment, sad. And I was like, sad that like I understand, like this is my community. I ended up calling him and like asking him, like, don't you understand like how this feels? And he basically got really upset with me, and was like, you don't need to be outspoken against the church. Like, don't comment stuff like that on Facebook and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, I had said like, this is important to me. I lost my community when I lost my faith in the church, and building up another one is important. I need a support group. And he was like, why would you need a support group? Why would you need that? I mean, you sure, you left the church, good for you, but keep your mouth shut about it. And I went away from that conversation feeling really terrible and feeling like I was really misunderstood by my parents. And, you know, I felt bad about it. And then I thought, I don't want people to tell me what I can and can't talk about, because this is something that's extremely important to me.
Right.
Because the church was extremely important to me. And so I decided, I think it was within a couple of days, I'm gonna just do the opposite of what he said. I'm gonna make a YouTube video talking about why I left the church and why I'm gonna talk about it. And I did. And that video ended up getting a lot more traction than I ever expected it to. And a lot of people like started like emailing me and commenting that like they loved it and they wanted me to make more and it was helpful to them. And I was like, holy cow, I'm like, these YouTube people that I look up to so much, I've done that, and I want to contribute to that community. I want more people to be able to have something like that, because when I left the church, seeing YouTube videos and listening to podcasts was what got me through. And so basically, like, I just kept going from there, and I probably wouldn't have if my dad hadn't yelled at me that day.
That's awesome.
You know, I've heard it said that, you know, from some people who like to speak out about their experiences, that your story becomes someone else's manual, right? And in a way, it seems like this is like giving back something that I wish that I had when I was going through this. Like, I wish that that I could watch someone who talks about these things. I would have felt less alone. I would have felt like there was someone, look, other people are going through similar experiences. And now I have people that I can look up to and say, okay, how did you get through this, right? Like, how did you get past the idea of just to give an example, eternal marriage, right? It's like, how did you get past that specific thing, or any other aspect of what was like? Lexi, what was your first cup of coffee like? Even something as simple as that, right?
I don't know.
but yeah, but like you have people that you can talk about that stuff too, right? Like, Lexi, what was your first shot like? You know?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting so many questions. I want to address as many of these as possible. Ethan, could you do me the favor and try to aggregate as many in chat as possible? And I'll start giving Lexi the questions that we got from Facebook earlier.
Oh, you got that. Great. All right.
So I'll stall for you while you look for questions in chat.
Works for me.
Stellar.
If you have any more questions, add them to the chat now, and we will happily ask Lexi.
Okay, this is from Cherry Darling on Facebook. Cherry asks, what shocked you the most about the non-Mormon world?
How wonderful it was. I've been taught my whole life that it was scary and bad, and like the people were like, I mean, like, honestly possessed by Satan. They were doing Satan's work. And then I joined that community and was like, wow, these people are like absolutely lovely. It's great. And they were so non-judgmental. Like, I mean, I don't know. It was amazing. It was not anything like I was expecting.
I remember thinking that when I was like going through the early phases of atheism, it's like, you know what? There's not nearly as much debauchery as they would lead you to think there is. Like, we're really mild people.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It's not like we really? Are overindulgent. I average 1 beer a month, right? So that was one thing that was shocking to me. It's like, yeah, other people, they're not that bad. They're kind of cool, actually.
Oh yeah, for sure. They're so nice and like so kind, and I don't know, like everybody that I've met and talked to about like, oh, I used to be a Mormon, they're like really, really sweet and like, oh yeah, and they talk to me about it, and I don't know, like even growing up in the church, we were taught that like, you know, if you have any alcohol at all of a sudden you're going to pass out and forget everything, or you're going to be a raging, angry alcoholic. And so seeing that like, oh no, this is just like normal and people are normal was strange to me.
Oh, when they're really big on that slippery slope too, aren't they? It's like if you hold hands, you can't go back to not holding hands. Once you kiss, you can't go back to just holding hands. Wow, oh, it's scary in there. Oh, the purity culture in Mormon teachings is so. Okay, from Karen Mealer, asked, what was the hardest part of getting out?
Just dealing with family, because I'm like a 7th generation Mormon. And so almost everybody in my family is Mormon, and they have been since the days of the pioneers. So they're very, very, very involved in the church, and us leaving for them was like, you know, oh my gosh, my kid's going, she's an apostate. She's going to go to hell, and she's not going to the highest kingdom of heaven. And it was really hard to see family members so upset and sad over me leaving their religion, because from the outside looking in, that's very weird. Like, wow, you don't need to freak out. But for them, it's really, really sad. So that was the hardest thing about navigating getting out.
You know, you just made me realize I had to tell Ethan about this too. It's not just heaven. There's celestial heaven and there's terrestrial heaven, and I forget the other one. But there's different levels of heaven. It's not just heaven.
That goes to a question we had earlier. Was there's multiple levels?
So there's celestial, telestial, terrestrial, and outer darkness. And outer darkness is basically hell. But within the celestial, which is like the highest kingdom, there's also 3 levels within that, which a lot of people don't even realize. So it's people are like, oh, the plan of salvation is so simple. It's like really not at all. So I can't even remember like all of the.
In the little I'm learning right now, and Puck, you need to correct me if I'm making a bad comparison, but it sounds like L. Ron Hubbard read the book of Joseph Smith, because there seems so many things to tie in here.
I don't know much about Scientology, so you're on your own with this one. I've always wanted to look it up, but you know, like reading about Thetans kind of freaks me out a little bit. But yeah, there's the whole established theology that goes beyond. Like I'm trying to stay away from Mormon theology right now, which is its own subject. Right? We could talk for days about theology. I'm just trying to talk about the social aspects today. You know, but there's goodness, Ethan. The seeing stones, like where do you want to go? Lexi, we got divine marriage and polygamy back in the day when it was not only endorsed but encouraged. So there's so many more we can do, but we just don't have time tonight. We answered the question of what your reasons were for leaving. Here's another question from Karen. When did you realize how toxic your faith could be, or the church could be?
I honestly didn't realize how bad it was until I'd already left, because when I was in it, I was part of that. And it's hard to notice how toxic you are until you see it from a different point of view. So all of the bad things within the church to me were just like, oh, it's just kind of put on the back burner. You don't think about it. But once I was like, oh, this is not even a true religion, then all of the horrible things about it start to really come out and shine. So honestly, it wasn't until after I left that I caught on to the toxicity.
And to clarify, you were just part of the main Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? I mean, there are some offshoots out there, but you were part of the. And I'm doing some counting here, and you said 7th generation. If we're to be a little on the generous side and call a generation 20 to 25 years, that brings us all the way back to the origin of the church.
Yeah. My first great whatever grandpa that joined, he was one of the very first, and his family crossed the plains together. He's written this book that's, I wouldn't say famous, but it's pretty big within the church. And they did, like pioneer movies, and they mentioned his name. It was actually he and his parents that were first baptized. And anyway, he had like 8 wives and crossed the plains and did all that stuff. So yeah.
Oh, Ethan, don't get wide eyes at 8 wives. 8 wives is the tip of the iceberg. Look up Brigham Young when we're done here. Okay. I believe he takes the tamale.
If anybody wants to like go do a little bit of research on this, that grandfather's name was Robert Taylor Burton. He has a book that everybody in my family owns about his life and his wives and his many, many children. It's very disturbing.
I've read some Mormon literature. I don't recall that one. Pearl of Great Price, of course, everybody's gone through that. Marvelous Work and Wonder. I'm sure you've heard of that book. Yeah. I was gifted that on my baptism. That was a very generous gift. Okay, Ethan, that does the question from Facebook. So what do we have on in questions in chat?
Sure. All right. So this is jumping back a bit. Why was it an issue with you having having a music channel?
What's the question?
Why? Oh, sorry. Apologies. Wow, I botched the first one. Okay. Have your children turned 7 yet? I've heard there are issues with wards proselytizing to children of Exmos.
Not yet. My oldest is only 5, so we have not had that problem yet. But I'm very prepared for when it happens.
I love how you say you're prepared for when it happens. Like, you know it's gonna, at some point, it's gonna come up.
I know it will because we've had contact with the missionaries. Like, I've fed the missionaries as an ex-Mormon, and so I know that they have my info, they have my number, and they probably would want to try to get me back.
Oh, Ethan, I gotta tell you about missionaries. 2 by 2 all around the world. Anyway, keep going, Lexi.
Are people who leave the church and then come back stigmatized?
Ooh. Cynthia, nice.
To be honest, I wouldn't really know, but I would guess that I honestly would guess that they would be like revered within the church, because it would be like so and so left, but they came back because they knew the truth, right. And it would be like look at them, look at their testimony, amazing. People that leave the church can come back, blah blah blah.
Oh, personal testimony is so huge in the Mormon church compared to others. Like, Catholics could care less. Mormons, you talk about that once a month. First Sunday? Is it first Sunday? Yeah. First Sunday, yeah.
Yes.
Do you listen to Thank God I'm an Atheist? The hosts of that show are ex-Mormons.
I have not heard of that one. I feel kind of bad for saying that.
Oh, what's it? Mr. Atheist, Jimmy Snow. Look him up if you haven't already.
All right. Question from Julie.
I love Jimmy.
What do you and your husband tell your children about dealing with their family members who are still in the church?
So all my kids are really, really little, and we don't say anything about it right now because they're all so young that, you know, I don't really feel like getting into it, and they haven't asked. They don't ask questions about that yet. And so I'm like, when you have questions, I'll answer them. But for now, I'll just let you live your life.
All right. Next question is from Junk Shop Library. Question for Lexi. What's the biggest misconception about the LDS church that you encounter, either from inside or now?
That's a hard question.
My answer to that would have been polygamy.
I know there's a lot of people who think that they still practice polygamy.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, they don't technically do it anymore, technically. So I don't know. I guess that's brought up a lot by like people who don't know about Mormons.
And technically, it's kind of a wink, because there are some offshoots of the LDS church that still practice.
Right. Well, and not only that, but you still, like, eternal polygamy is a thing. It's a thing they think will, when we die, polygamy will still be a thing. And, you know, a lot of the apostles are sealed or married eternally to more than one wife. So it's still a thing they believe in. They just don't really like to talk about it because it's embarrassing.
Can we blow Ethan's mind away really quick and talk about baptism for the dead?
Baptism for the dead?
You don't know anything about that?
No.
Yeah, Mormons, they don't literally baptize dead bodies, but they do baptisms by proxy for people who have died. So when you starting, I think at 12 years old, they might have actually made that a little bit younger now, but when I was in, it was starting at 12 years old. You would go to the temple and you would get into this giant tub of like 12 oxen, 12 golden oxen, and they would dunk you underwater and baptize you in the name of somebody that had died so that that person could go to heaven. And they did do this for a lot of people. Like I think they've done it for Hitler multiple times. And I mean, they've been very insensitive about it in the past. I'll just say that.
Oh yeah, the point is that there are some people who died without the revelation of the gospel. They have to have a chance to receive the word of the gospel so they can evaluate it for themselves and have an opportunity to enter the celestial heaven. The only way to do that is through a baptism. The only way for that to happen is if someone was baptized in their name.
Okay.
It made sense at some point.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
It made sense. Yeah.
Okay, anyway,
made sense at the time.
Keep going with the questions here.
All right. Another question for Lexi. Does the LDS Church excommunicate people who leave, like Jehovah's Witnesses?
So I think they mean like shun, like Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
And within the church, you can get excommunicated for doing really bad things, like adultery, or apostasy. So, some famous people that have been excommunicated would be like John Boleyn or Bill Reel or Jeremy Runnels. People that question too much or are outspoken against the church are excommunicated. But as far as like shunning goes, it's more of a cultural thing. It's not enforced by the church, but a lot of people that are very immersed in the Mormon culture will shun their family members if they leave. So I personally know somebody really well that is in a very Mormon family. And when he decided to leave the church and told his parents, who are people I know and love, they told him, "You are not welcome in our house. You will not come under our roof until you are a fully believing member wearing your garments."
With a recommend.
Okay.
Must be temple worthy to enter this house.
Have either of you heard of the second anointing?
I have not.
Yes.
What is it?
So it's something the church doesn't really talk about, but it's basically where a person, usually somebody very high up in the church, will go to the temple. There's been interviews where they talk about it, but it's basically where you do a special ceremony where you're like, it'll be a man and his wife or whatever. The wife will wash the man's feet, like Jesus washed or the feet of his disciples. And then what it basically means is that you cannot do anything that will prevent you from going to the celestial kingdom or the highest kingdom of heaven. So you could do anything at that point and still be considered worthy. And, they choose certain people to have this happen to. But it's something the church doesn't talk about. It's not like you can go and ask and get answers. It's very like sacred, not secret.
Okay. Before I get to Tim's question, I want to address his first statement. Questioning LDS beliefs is very relatable to me, but I still think there's a place for a basic belief in something bigger than ourselves. I would say I believe in the people around me. Outside of myself and the people around me, I see no need for a supernatural belief.
I talked to someone about AA once, and they said that part of the AA steps is the surrendering to a higher power. They're not very specific as to what that higher power is. They just say higher power. It lets you put whatever you want in there. And I think that you don't have to go outside something like, say, an obligation to society or family, but as part of the higher power. So, like, but at the same time, I also leave room for the possibility that there are things out there beyond our perception, beyond our current means to investigate. They're there. We just can't interact with them yet. That's possible, but not so much to the point where I'm going to say, yeah, they're there. So I guess it depends on what you mean by higher power. Lexi, where are you going with this?
I mean, I see what the person is saying, but and I get a lot of comments about like a lot of people that are Christian see that I've left the church and they're so happy, but then they're like, but don't abandon your belief in a higher power. or even people that are in the church are like, yeah, like there's bad things, but that's not the point. Like the point is just to believe in Jesus. And I'm like, okay, I get why you think that, but like if something isn't true, then I don't have a reason to follow it and believe in it. So for me, you know, like I'm not going to just abandon belief in a higher power, but if it's not, you know, for me, if it's not evidently true, there's no reason to believe it's true.
All right. Next, the actual question Tim wanted to ask, is your atheism more than a standard organized religion position? It's kind of an awkwardly worded question.
I think what Tim means is it that you don't believe in God, or that you don't believe in the religion around God? Like what's your
I think what he's this person is saying wants to know if atheism is an organized religion.
Not even close.
Yes, I would agree.
It's just the lack of belief in God. There's literally nothing other than that. Just not believing in a God. And every atheist will give you like totally different, like, I mean, every atheist is so incredibly different in every other belief that they have. I mean, there's atheists that believe in ghosts because that doesn't
bewilders me. I know, it still bewilders me. It's like, how do you get to atheism?
Yeah, no, I agree, but
and then accept ghosts? I don't get that.
Well, personal experiences, Ethan.
I'm just saying, like, everybody's different.
No, I agree. Have you had other friends and family secretly come out to you as non-believers?
Yes.
Ooh.
That was very exciting. Nobody like really, you know, not like brothers and sisters or anything like that, but I have had cousins message me after watching my YouTube videos, telling me like, wow, like I didn't know this stuff, or that's really interesting, or wow, like, why did nobody tell me that before? Which was one of my first questions, honestly. Like, why did nobody tell me about Joseph Smith? But yeah, they've had people that I'm close to come out to me like that.
Well, that's why they really hammer in love for the prophet early and primary, right? That way, you know, you say you already know what you believe, and then any stuff that anybody tells you off to the side, it's like, well, okay, maybe that happened, but you know what? The overall good that the prophet did makes up for all that.
Yeah,
crazy.
he's like a hero. It's like, I mean, it really is like hero worship, and it's the kind of thing where like, but for me, like, being so like wrapped up in this hero identity that they'd presented me with, when I found out other information, it was all the more shocking and all the more damning to be like, oh, like he was supposed to be like amazing and perfect, and he's actually kind of horrible in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he doesn't sound like the best human being. Do Mormons hate Jews?
No.
I don't recall any specific theology about that, so.
No, I don't either. Not that I'm familiar with any of this. Thank you. All atheism means is the lack of belief in a god or goddess. Yeah. Or goddess and goddesses. I like that Julie added that. I'm going to remember that one, Julie. And goddesses. That is awesome. All right, so the last, if you have any other quick questions, put them in the comments. Otherwise, we're wrapping up here.
I do have one, like, this is what so go ahead. I do have one big question that I want to wrap this up with, but let's see what the chat has here.
Yeah, let's finish this last one.
Yeah.
So would you characterize Mormons as overzealous young fangirls?
Now, laugh if you want to, but there are some people, especially youth, who take this extremely seriously. Extremely seriously.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, especially with like current and modern prophets and apostles, like if you get to see one in person or shake their hand, especially, like everybody in your ward's going to hear about it. You are going to go up and bear your testimony in testimony meeting. You're going to say, I shook the prophet's hand and I felt like power within me, and I know he's a prophet because I, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, it could be one of the 70 and you'd say that about him.
You can say that about almost anybody that's higher up in the church. It's a thing. I mean, I even like the bishop. There was a kid in my ward that like the bishop gets up, bears his testimony, and then this kid goes up to bear his testimony, and it's like talking about how the bishop is so amazing, and then he's like, when he was talking, there was light around his figure. I swear. And I was just like, even as a member, I was like, really?
I call BS on that one.
Yeah, Ethan's raising his eyebrow at this, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember all this. I remember.
See, that's where I have trouble relating with, I guess, I don't know, Puck, Lexi. While there was a point where I did believe in God, while, yes, I believed in ghosts and all that, I could never get into that, like, whole worship thing. Like, I just remember sitting around church, like, watching everybody kneel and thinking, like, is this serious? Like, is everybody in on this? Like, that thing didn't make sense to me. Like, God made sense to me, but that whole joint prayer, it just always was very confusing to me. And it was hard for me to take seriously.
Oh, I can't even tell you how many times I had to repeat the sacramental prayer. Like, you stutter once, repeat the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
I believe my personal best is 5 times. Okay.
Jen Aldrich, light around people, white horses, and magical underwear. Mormons are a trip. Jen Aldrich.
Yep.
You know what, Jen? This is my first time actually getting to say hi to you personally, not in chat,
Jen.
In person. So, hello, Jen. It's a pleasure to have you in here. Thank you very much for joining us. I like Jake's last question.
Oh, I missed it. Okay. Do you spend any time searching for or studying a personal ethos to replace what you used to consume at church, i.e., Stoicism philosophy?
Not really, probably in the way that they're talking about. For me, it's more like I just want to learn more about the world around me and about science and about why people believe the things they do. And like, I don't know, I'm like really into studying about, like, this is going to sound really weird probably, but I'm really into learning about death and like the way that people mourn, all of that thing, because like, for me, leaving the church and becoming an atheist, the saddest part was realizing like I no longer believe that people live on after they die, and studying death and the way different cultures look at death has been a comfort for me to be like, everybody dies and that's okay and I'm okay. So there's not like a spirituality of any kind that goes into it, but more just learning about the world and learning about people.
Okay, well, I got 2 final things, and then it's getting close to bedtime. It's 10:30 over here. I want to end this with the way I usually end these episodes is by saying, you know, where I started and where I am now, and by like spending so much time talking to someone who was so deep in a community and had to find a new community coming out of it. I've known ex-Mormons, but this is the first time I've really gotten to spend a lot of time talking to one. And I think that I am underestimating just how difficult it is to start over basically from scratch and have to make a new community and a new network of friends and sometimes even family that you counted on for support. You gotta start all over again. And sometimes that means friends. Sometimes that means like learning stuff. Like if you were in an atmosphere where you weren't encouraged to learn about things of the world, for lack of a better phrase. For young Earth creationists, this means actually studying geology. But that's got to be so much more difficult. And I'm trying to imagine it, but that's all I can do. So, you know, my heart goes out to anybody who actually had to live through this. It's got to be so much more difficult than I can even imagine. Which leads to the last question that I have for you. What is the best thing that we as veteran atheists can do to help people who are just coming out or who haven't yet but want to?
I think the best thing that they can do and that we can do as a community is just be very, very kind and supportive as we can be. Because leaving the church, leaving religion behind like that, at least for me, it was completely life-changing and something that I never expected to go through. But, you know, had there been people that were unkind to me during that process, it would have turned me off of atheism. Finding channels with people that were understanding and kind, and, you know, when I asked questions or when I said, help me, I need a community, and people were so welcoming, that was what made all the difference. That was what you know, I guess put me on the path that I am on. And I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say.
No, that was great.
Nice to people is the best.
Yeah, and there's so many people in chat, and hopefully that's what you guys take out of this, is be an exemplary atheist. Be that nice person and not the, I get it, we've all been the angry atheist, but reach out and be the gentle community, the loving and encouraging community that these people need coming out of their old community.
Right. And I mean, it's not like everybody can be perfect all the time, and there's always going to be times where your angry atheist self comes out. I know it does for me. Sometimes I'm on Twitter and I'm just like, I can't stand you. But like, I don't know, to somebody when, you know, they're leaving a comment or they're asking questions or they're searching for something, I do try to be as nice as I can, just remembering that at some point I was that person.
Well, as a final note here, I told you in the chat a couple of days ago that I have a special gift for you. And I want to thank you really quick for spending this time with us tonight and the time preparing for this, because I know you've been freaking out for a couple of weeks about your very first live YouTube. So thank you so much for sharing that with me.
You did awesome.
And allowing me to be the one that brings Lexi live, right? So this is something that I want to do for all my What the Puck guests going forward. I'm gonna screen share here. Ethan, can you allow this?
Yes, I can.
Okay, here we go.
By the way, Lexi, it was awesome meeting you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You guys are so nice.
So one thing that I want to do as a thanks is everybody who comes on my show as a guest is going to have, my graphic designer is going to make them a custom puck. So Lexi, you are going to get the very first one. This is you permanently commemorated in puck form. I'm going to send this to you in PNG
awesome.
and PDF form. You're going to be immortalized as the first person to get one on my channel. And,
I don't even have one, Lexi. You're getting one, and I don't even have one, and I was his first guest.
So once again, thank you so much for being here. Please stick around and chat for just a little bit longer so I can make sure that I get this over to you properly.
Wait, one last thing.
Yes.
Before we end the broadcast, Lexi, where can everyone find out more about you?
My YouTube channel is just called Exmo Lex, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Exmo_Lex. And yeah, you can find all my everything there.
Awesome.
This was wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Wait, before we go,
Thank you for having me.
We got to do a high five. Lexi, you got me? Come on, Puck. High five it. Come on. Come on. Up,
I
up,
can't.
up,
You guys are underneath me.
All the way up. Raise it up. Raise it up.
There you go.
This is so hard.
You guys are wonderful. Thank you all so much, everybody in chat, for joining us, and join us again next week for another episode of What the Puck.